Hello, this is Sonara.
Good morning everyone, this is Mike.
And we're reading the County Press for Friday, March the 3rd.
And we start with the society news before we move on to the headlines. So, society news for Friday the 3rd of March. On Tuesday, the following coffee mornings are held in support of the Society. On Tuesday, that's the 7th of March, the coffee mornings are at Knighton, the post office, starting at 10:15 until 12 p.m. The Dolphin Swim Group will meet at the Waterside Pool in Ryde on Tuesday, the 7th of March. Swimming starts at 8 p.m. and the group has sole use of the pool for this session. Lifeguards are present while the group are swimming. If you wish to join, please call the Society first to advise us of your level of swimming ability. On Wednesday, the Society coffee morning will be held this coming Wednesday on the 8th of March. Come and join us for a cup of coffee and a chat. Why not bring a friend along as well, as the coffee mornings are open to all. On Thursday, the Knitters and Natterers will be meeting at Millbrook House this Thursday on the 9th of March, starting at 10:30 a.m. till 2 p.m. There is help for knitting of all levels, coffee and chat and readers that will entertain you in the afternoon. Please note, transport may be available to some of the groups, but please call the Society first on 52205. Any other news? The annual general meeting date is the 13th of March 2017. The AGM will be on the 13th of March at Millbrook House at 10:30 a.m. Guarantor members will receive the notice and other papers at least 21 days before the meeting. The AGM will be followed by a forum. Please submit any questions to the board by the 6th of March to enable us to prepare detailed responses. Brading Roman Villa Special Day. On Friday the 17th of March, Brading Roman Villa is holding a special day for visually impaired people on the island. There will be guided tours of the museum as well as opportunities to handle artifacts from the museum. Should there be a large number of people wishing to attend, the staff at the museum will break up the large group into smaller groups, and anyone wishing to attend must register their interest with the Isle of Wight Society for the Blind first. This is a free event, but you will have to pay for your own refreshments at the museum, and anyone requiring transport may have to pay a small fee towards fuel. The tour starts at 10:30 a.m. Please contact the Society for more information.
The Isle of Wight Macular Group meets as part of the coffee morning at Millbrook House on the first Wednesday of each month from 10:30 until 12. On the 1st of March, Tom McIlnity and his guide dog Brunel joined the group as their guest speaker. Tom is the Macular Society's regional manager for the South East, and part of his role is to visit the local groups in his area. There was a lively group including Carla Evermy and Karen Chessel from the Sensory Support Team, and Laura Gardner, who is the Eye Clinic Liaison Officer based at St Mary's Hospital. Tom talked about the Macular Society, its work and the services it offers, as well as types of macular degeneration, treatment and research. There was a good discussion and information was shared about all sorts of issues affecting people living with sight loss, including benefits, transport, audio description, mobility, technology, and daily living skills. If you or a family member or friend has been diagnosed with macular degeneration, or you would like more information about sight loss, then come along for a friendly and informal chat. Review of assisted refuse collections. As you may be aware, The Isle of Wight Council, working in partnership with Amy, offer a free assisted collection service to residents who may have difficulties presenting their waste and recycling on their allocated collection day. As a visually impaired person, you might currently benefit from this service. The Isle of Wight Council are conducting an annual review of all registered assisted collection properties and will shortly be sending out letters asking if those who already use the service still require it. Along with the letter will be a form for you to complete. These forms will need to be returned by a certain date, which has yet to be disclosed. If the forms are not returned, the Council will conclude that the service is no longer required and your address will be taken off their assisted collection service register. If you require assistance with the form, then you can contact the Isle of Wight Council on 01983 823 777. And on to scaffolding news. And we have a list of known footway obstructions for works including scaffolding or hoarding. We are unable to include end dates, as many are extended on a week-by-week basis. Also included are tables and chair permits that have been issued in the past week. In the Bay Area, 11A St John's Road, Sandown, Napoleon's Landing, Esplanade, Sandown, 2A York Road, Sandown, Trouville Hotel, Esplanade, Sandown, 15 Station Avenue, Sandown, rear of Flat 2, 55 Town Lane on the High Street, Sandown, 4 to 6 New Road, Brading, Artie Shakes, 8 Falcon Cross Road, Shanklin, is on hold, and new cherry pickers come cranes in that area, Shanklin Cliff Lift, Eastcliff Esplanade, Shanklin, due to go up on 6th of March. Eastcliff Promenade will be shut to pedestrians for these works. And again, Shanklin Cliff Lift Road, Shanklin, due up on 6th March. The area around the Cliff Lift will be closed to pedestrians for these works. In the Cowes area, the Watch House Lane, Cowes, the development site in Castle Street, East Cowes, GKN Clarence Road, East Cowes, 15 Alfred Street, East Cowes, 2 Sun Hill in Cowes, and current hoardings 272 to 283 Arctic Road, Cowes.
The Newport area is Nippert Court, West Street, Newport, Diva Hairdressing, Ace Shoe Repairs, and the vacant premises 91 to 94 Pyle Street, Newport, Newport Minster, St Thomas's Square, Newport, Newport Quay Hotel, Quay Street, Newport, 131 Honey Hill, Newport, 6 Portland Street, Newport, 32 Chapel Street, Newport, Island Optical, 1 High Street, Newport, and that's on hold. 11 Quay Street, Newport, is due up on the 7th of March. The Ryde area is 26 Nelson Street, Ryde. The Hare Centre, 13 to 14 High Street, Ryde. The Anchorage Seafield Road, Seaview. Scaffold is on Rope Walk. Sea Hill House, Pier Road, Seaview. Yardley, West Street, Seaview. The West White area is Yarmouth Police Station, High Street, Yarmouth, due up on the 14th of March. The South White area, 2 Trinity Road, Ventnor. The Spa Shop, 1 West Street, Wroxall. Former Mill Bay Hotel on the Esplanade at Ventnor. The White Lion, Black Gang Road, Knighton. And this week's In Touch. In Touch, in this week's episode on February the 23rd, Greater Manchester Police were called to Levensholme by two witnesses who reported a man with a gun behaving in an agitated manner. The attending firearms officers tasered the man and subsequently discovered he was blind, and that what had been thought to be a gun was, in fact, his folding white cane. This follows a similar incident in 2012, when a blind man's white stick was mistaken for a samurai sword. In last week's case, the police apologised, and the Professional Standards Branch of Greater Manchester Police carried out an investigation. It found that the police had acted appropriately, and the blind man has not, thus far, made a complaint. We speak to Solicitor Advocate Sophie Khan, who represented the case in 2012, on her concerns about the training undertaken by police when it comes to tasering vulnerable people. Steve White, Chair of the Police Federation of England and Wales, tells us that the training and policies in this area are constantly being reviewed. Red Cell tells us why he's decided to part with his first guide dog after 9 months. We now move on to the County Press for March the 3rd, 2017, and here are the headlines. Childcare in crisis, and Rita burglary, a man has been arrested.
And the first headline, childcare in crisis. Nurseries struggle to survive amid fears of business rate rises and living wage impact. A triple whammy of business rate rises, the national living wage and new living wage and new rules forcing new nurseries to double their provision of subsidised childcare have left many struggling to survive. Nurseries and preschools nationally have warned that they will have to pass on increased costs to parents or even close, leaving working parents who rely on childcare high and dry. One island provider accused the government of expecting nurseries to look after children for less than the price of a Big Mac, and said he was unlikely to make a profit next year. Mike Bolan is Managing Director of KNL Childcare, which runs St George's Nursery and Preschool in Arreton and Oakfield Preschool and Little Squirrels Community Nursery, both in Ryde. He expects the company's $12,500 business rates bill to rocket from April as a result of the government's national revaluation, and said the wage bill for 39 staff had risen by £20,000 following the introduction of the national living wage. There's a Facebook page called Champagne Nurseries on Lemonade Funding, which sums it up, said Mike. The extent of problems that people are facing is just incredible. There's talk across the industry of business rates rising by 200%. We're expecting the worst. An increase in subsidised provision, free to parents and funded by the government, from 15 to 30 hours, has also hit providers hard. For children aged 3 to 4, we charge £4.35 per hour, but we only receive £3.72 for the government subsidised hours, and 30 hours is horrendously onerous. Hardly anyone needs more than that, so we no longer have parents paying for extra hours at our regular rate. The quality of childcare has improved phenomenally since we started with Oakfield in 1999, with more regulation and better training. It's much more of a professional business, but there is a cost to that. I don't see how we can make a profit next year. All nurseries are going to struggle. Ricky LaBalestia, who owns Cheeky Chimps Ride, said his business rates had doubled to £5,000 and his wage bill risen by £18,000. We've had to make cutbacks. We put our prices up by £1 a day, and we no longer send staff on extra training courses. We only have the statutory minimum number of staff on duty. We're lucky. We pay a £2,000 peppercorn lease, and that's the only thing keeping us going. It wouldn't be viable otherwise. But it's only a matter of time before the boiler goes or the roof needs fixing, and then what? It feels like we're skating on thin ice. We are well established. We've been going for 20 years, but this is the closest I've come to selling up.
Rita burglary. A man is arrested. A man has been arrested after a 95-year-old woman's home was broken into and £700 was stolen. As reported by the county press last week, Marguerite Walker, known as Rita, awoke to a man standing by her bed. The intruder allegedly grabbed her arm and dragged her around her flat in Ryde, demanding she showed him where her cash was. She said he then stole a Bible with £700 in it, which she had saved for her grandchildren's Christmas presents. Police confirmed yesterday they had arrested a 34-year-old Ryde man on suspicion of burglary, and he had been bailed. The incident happened on September the 14th last year.
And to follow on from the first headline, impossible situation over provision. Faced with increasing financial pressures, one nursery has scrapped provision for older children. From September, Cheeky Chimps of Ryde will no longer run an after-school club for children aged 8 and over. Owner Ricky Labalestia said that demand had dropped as most schools now run their own clubs. But one parent whose son attends Binstead Primary School, which has no after-school provision, said, "I'm in a position where I can't fulfil my working hours because of a lack of childcare. I really have no idea what I'm going to do. It's either find a job that fits in with school hours or move my child to a different school that provides after-school childcare. It has left me and other working parents in an impossible situation." Binstead Primary School head teacher Alison Mosdale said there had never been enough demand for an after-school club previously, but the school would consider introducing one if that changed. Mr. Labalestia said Cheeky Chimps had no choice but to prioritise younger children, who attracted guaranteed government funding at a time when the business faced significant financial pressures because of increased business rates and staff costs. It was difficult to look after younger children alongside older, more boisterous ones, he added.
Fears grow over radio bill row. Traffic wardens and street pastors are among those at risk over the Ryde communications breakdown, it has been said. As the wrangle continued over who should pay the electricity bill for the radio equipment at Ryde Town Hall, the chairman of Shopwatch, which relies on the antenna, said she was gobsmacked by the lack of communication from County Hall. The company which bought the town hall says the council is responsible for the bill. The council denies that. Shopwatch chairman Lindsay McFarlane said services affected included pub watch, council parking attendants, street pastors, Ryde Harbour and staff at railway stations. PCSOs also carried radios. She said, "This is a vital service, especially at night. It is 2 weeks ago the power was cut and no one from County Hall has responded to us. No one seems to be treating this with urgency. Our concern is they will not until someone is at risk and has no means of alerting police. She said some Shopwatch members in higher risk situations had been issued with walkie-talkies. The Isle of Wight Council was unable to add to its statement of last week when it said it was working with partners to see how the service could be reinstated as soon as possible.
Cowes Week display in doubt. Cowes Week's popular fireworks display may not go ahead this year. Rumours of the Friday finale being cancelled have circulated for many years, but fresh fears of a lack of funding have left the 2017 display hanging in the balance. In a Facebook post on Wednesday, Cowes High Street claimed that the decision had been confirmed by Cowes Week Limited. The post said there will be no Cowes Week fireworks this year. Previous years we've had the huff and puff about will they or won't they. This year Cowes Week Limited has confirmed to the Isle of Wight Council the fireworks will not be taking place. Councillor Jeff Banks of Cowes Town Council said it all came down to money. The Town Council has money set aside if it actually takes place. Until funding is secured, it will not take place. Kate Kirby, Chair of Cowes Business Association, said that talks with a new Cowes Week partner were ongoing. It's not doom and gloom. We're waiting to see what the new partner might do, she said. It will make a significant difference not having a main sponsor, but there will always be a Cowes Week. Cowes Week Limited declined to comment on the situation.
After Bestival, a new music festival is coming to Robin Hill Country Park in September, replacing Bestival, which has moved from the Isle of Wight to Dorset. Eclectica, described as an eclectic boutique festival, will take place at the Down End Park on Saturday and Sunday, September the 9th and 10th. No main acts have yet been named, but Robin Hill is promising a dynamic mix of music, performances and entertainment. The event is being produced and managed by Vectis Ventures, the company which owns Robin Hill and Black Gang Chine. Details of headline acts and tickets will be released shortly.
Hotel damaged in sex session. A tourist smashed up a Ryde hotel room during a sex session, Island magistrates heard. Malcolm Ben Stables, 29, who gave a care of address of Howard Road, Hilsea, stayed in the town's Casbah guest house during the bank holiday scooter rally, where it was alleged he caused £1,110 worth of damage. He admitted one count of criminal damage when he appeared in court last Friday. Barry Arnett, defending, said drink played a part. He was having consensual sex with his girlfriend that turned rough. They weren't throwing things around, only each other. The list of damaged items included bent linen, a mattress, pillows and a table lamp, plus a lead-lined window valued by the hotel at £860, which Stables claimed he broke by accident when he tried to open it. Stables was ordered to pay £310 in compensation and £40 costs.
Winning Stories spells TV fame for teacher. A reception class teacher and children's author from the island could one day be mentioned in the same breath as writers David Walliams and Michael Morpurgo after winning the coveted Blue Peter Book Award for his new story. Kieran Larwood, who teaches at Wroxall Primary School, was shortlisted for the award last year with his book The Five Realms, The Legend of Podkin, One Ear. The first of a trilogy of tales about a colony of warrior rabbits. The story features Podkin, the son of a rabbit chieftain, who has to lead an escape from the terrible threat of evil villains. The 43-year-old father of 4 of Hawthorne Meadows in East Cowes appeared live on BBC's Blue Peter in front of millions of viewers yesterday, which was Thursday, to talk about his book and to show off his award. He travelled to Manchester on Wednesday to record a spot on BBC's Newsround programme and to meet the Blue Peter crew. Kieran's book in the content fiction category was voted the winner by 400 young bookworms around the country. He said, "I'm amazed, pleased and honoured to receive this prestigious award. Hopefully winning the award will boost book sales. My publishers, who say it's a really good award to have, called me on Monday to tell me the good news. It was a great moment for me. I was really chuffed and excited. I enjoy my job as a teacher, but it's my ultimate dream to become a full-time author. My 8-year-old daughter was the first person I read it to, and she loves it. She watches Blue Peter and was really excited about seeing her daddy on TV. Kieran, who published his first book, Freaks, in 2012, has already written the Podkin follow-up, due to be published in October and expected to be titled The Gift of Dark Hollow. Published by Faber and Faber, The Five Realms, The Legend of Podkin, One Ear is priced at £9.98 in hardback and £6.99 in paperback, or £4.68 for a Kindle version from Amazon.
Ireland will suffer. Smaller schools in particular may struggle, and I genuinely fear for what lies ahead for a few of them. A new schools funding formula, which the government says will tackle the outdated and unfair current system, has been based on weak evidence and will lock in historic inequities, according to information leaked to the county press. The CP obtained details of a presentation given to school leaders on Monday, in which the Isle of Wight Council outlined its draft response to a consultation on the proposals. Although the council has declined to comment until its response is prepared in full, the presentation slides reveal that the authority has serious concern about the weak evidence base and extensive use of averages used to develop the formula. It also questions whether sufficient funding will be available. It suggests the allocation for additional needs is too high, which will have a detrimental impact on the basic funding that schools need to operate effectively, and raises concerns around funding for deprived areas and island-specific costs. A proposed funding floor, which means no school will face a reduction of more than 3% per pupil, was described as flawed. One of the slides states the funding floor locks in historic inequities and means fair funding can never be achieved. Another reveals in 2016-17, just 5 island schools were running at a budget deficit. By 2018-19, that number is projected to rise to 21. One senior teacher said, "The proposed formula appears to take away the ability of local authorities and our schools forum to respond to need at a local level. It looks like trying for a national solution that does not take account of the nuances in different locations. We need to highlight the issues we face as an island, such as recruitment difficulties and costs of collaboration. On the island, smaller schools in particular may struggle, and I genuinely fear for what lies ahead for a few of them." Unison Branch Secretary Mark Chiverton said that he and teaching union leaders had repeatedly called for more funding to be made available. The government has claimed that island schools would receive an extra £900,000 during the forthcoming year, should the formula be implemented in full, but Mr. Chiverton said that was an illusion. Even schools set to receive a marginal increase will actually lose money due to other factors such as increased costs, he said. A number of schools have already presented proposals that would mean significant job losses for teaching and non-teaching staff, which will have a detrimental impact on children's education and increase pressure on already hard-pressed staff. Our message is that the Council and the MP need to press for more money. The national pot is just not big enough. It's simply being redistributed in a different way, and island schools will suffer massively. The formula would leave schools facing a £5.5 million budget cut over 4 years, with primaries losing an average of £339 per pupil and secondaries £477, according to the unions.
Martin's mission to help fund grandson's op. An island grandfather is doing his bit to help raise £40,000 for his grandson to have a pioneering cerebral palsy operation. Martin Fisher, aged 71, of Medina Park, Newport, has organised fundraising events on the island to support the ongoing campaign for his grandson Ollie, who is 6. In October, Martin raised more than £1,000 by shaving and painting his head, and last night, Thursday, a quiz evening was held for Ollie at the Folly in Whippingham. Martin's friends, Graham Poulton, John Oakes and Dave Wood, will also be boosting the fundraising campaign by walking the length of the Isle of Wight coastal path from East Cowes over 7 days. Ollie, who lives in Southampton with his parents Cara and Paul Jenkins, was diagnosed with the condition when he was a year old. The condition mostly affects his legs, which means he is unable to walk unaided. It is hoped the operation will improve Ollie's chances of walking and potentially prevent him from being wheelchair bound as he gets older. The operation is no longer available on the NHS, and the cost is due to intense physiotherapy afterwards. So far, around £23,000 of the £40,000 has been raised. Money can be donated towards Ollie's cause at https://tinygirl.com/Joe28NSF.
Couple fundraise for children's cause. More than £1,600 has been raised for Naomi House Children's Hospice near Winchester, thanks to the tireless efforts of Shanklin couple Daryl and Roy Kirby. They ran a 1940s themed stall at the Isle of Wight Steam Railway in Haven Street, set up a Christmas tree at the annual Brystone Christmas Tree Festival, as well as running their annual bookstall outside their home on Shanklin's Cliff Path. Daryl said, "I would like to give many thanks to Shanklin Rotary Club, who very kindly give us their CDs and DVDs left over from their sale, which is a great help, and to all the locals who donate. It is nice to see charities benefit from other charities."
Drink driver. I could have killed someone. Shocking video footage showing a drink driver zigzagging all over the road in Shanklin was played to island magistrates. Plumber Philip Booth's Peugeot was captured on a dash cam by a concerned motorist who followed him after he became concerned Booth was driving under the influence. The footage showed Booth repeatedly driving on the wrong side of the road. He drove the van having drunk a quarter of a bottle of vodka and was later found to be nearly 3 times over the legal drink-drive limit. Anne Smout, prosecuting, said Booth, of 68, aged 63, of Green Lane, Shanklin, was spotted at around 3 p.m. on January the 26th, just as children were making their way home from school. Concerned driver Jason York contacted police on his hands-free mobile and gave a running commentary to officers about where Booth was. Booth, of previous good character, spotted Mr. York following him and shortly afterwards walked into Shanklin Police Station. He confessed he had been drinking and gave a breath test reading of 111. The legal limit is 35. He told police he had been having marital difficulties and was living in a motorhome. He also told police he had drunk a quarter of a bottle of vodka. Mrs. Smout said, "It was more by luck than judgment there was not an accident." Speaking in his own defence, Booth told the bench his wife and he had had a ruck and he was living in a camper van. He said, "It was appalling driving. I could have killed somebody. I could have killed myself. I am sorry." Booth was told to pay £85 cost and an £85 victim charge. He was also sentenced to a 12-month community order and told to complete 100 hours of unpaid work, as well as being banned from driving for 26 months.
Date for new floatie. The new £3.2 million Cowes Floating Bridge has been unveiled. Currently being built by Welsh firm Mainstay Marine, the vessel will not arrive until the end of March, significantly later than planned. It was originally hoped that the floating bridge would be ready by the end of last year or early this year, but due to technical and design issues, the date was put back to mid-February. The Isle of Wight Council said it was now scheduled to be placed on the chains on April the 3rd. Following trials and staff training, it was due to enter service in early May. From design to delivery, the project will have taken 22 months. A council spokesperson said, "Due to the tidal nature of the works, reconstruction of both slipways will not be completed until the end of March, and this will be closely followed by works to the adjacent footways to improve pedestrian access. The bridge could then commence service in early May." The sixth floating bridge to operate between Cowes and East Cowes since 1859, the new vessel measures 37 metres and 180 tonnes of steel was used on the hull. The equivalent, the Isle of Wight Council pointed out, of 250 cows. Designed as a roll-on, roll-off chain ferry with hydraulically operated loading and unloading ramps at each end, the deck will have 4 lanes for vehicles with additional space for motorbikes, scooters and bicycles. Companies will be able to advertise via poster and television screens in the passenger accommodation and vessels' hulls.
New home for town's post office. The long-running quest to find a new permanent home for Cowes Post Office is on the verge of being solved. Post office bosses have announced a new outlet will be situated in the Southern Cooperative Store in Mill Hill Road from May the 19th. The previous permanent post office was in the former Southern Cooperative Store in Terminus Road, but shut its doors when the shop was sold to Marks & Spencer. Since December 2015, the post office has operated from a temporary building at Cowes Yacht Haven, but under the proposals, that building will close on Tuesday, April the 25th, before the new office opens. Alternative post offices include those at Well Road, East Cowes, and Pallants Road, Northwood. The new 3-counter branch will be open an extra 68 hours a week, including all day Sunday. A 6-week consultation has been launched about the plan.
Trust idea to link faith schools. Church of England and Catholic schools could be brought together to create the island's first religious academies trust, a move which could potentially involve 17 schools. In response to government plans to convert schools into academies, the CE and Catholic bishops of Portsmouth have agreed to a feasibility study to see if a joint Anglican and Catholic trust could be established to improve standards. Education staff in both dioceses will consider between now and May the potential benefits and challenges to such proposal, which would require approval from the Department for Education and Regional Schools Commissioner. Any new trust would be run by trustees and a company, and all schools involved would become academies. Community schools could join and would not have to become religious academies. At the moment, there are 11 Church of England, 4 Catholic, and 2 joint faith schools on the island. The Catholic diocese has said it expects its 4 schools, primaries in Ryde, Carisbrooke, Totland and East Cowes, to join a multi-academy trust. In a statement on Tuesday, Catholic and Church of England bishops, the Right Reverend Philip Egan and the Right Reverend Christopher Foster, said, "Our commitment as diocesan bishops to taking a lead in advancing the spiritual, economic, social and wider flourishing of communities on the island continues, and we are acutely aware that this is demonstrably evidenced in our support for schools and all they can bring to families and society. As part of our considerations as to how we might best work with schools in achieving the best outcomes for our children on the island, we have decided to commission a feasibility study on the potential establishment of a joint Anglican Catholic MAT. This is not a signal of intent to definitely set up an MAT, but an initial exploration of issues that need further consideration."
Rod and the rest of the festival stars to help island charities. Charities on the island are once again being asked to apply for free tickets to the Isle of Wight Festival, which they can then use to raise funds. 20 pairs of tickets are available to the 2017 festival, which features stars such as veteran rocker Rod Stewart. Organisations will be able to apply for the tickets until March the 31st, with a brief explanation of what they intend to do with the tickets to benefit their charity or good cause. Festival owner John Giddings said, "We try to give as much as possible back to the island and bring the community closer to the festival each year. We hope this will continue the great success we've had working with charities and the good causes, and I look forward to hearing about their fundraising endeavours." Last year, the initiative helped to promote girl guiding across the Isle of Wight. Leslie Clifford, Commissioner for Girl Guiding Isle of Wight, said, "There were great benefits in receiving the Isle of Wight Festival tickets. After our raffle, which raised over £1,000, it enabled lots of girls to travel to the mainland and go to camps. We can now buy some camping equipment, and the money covered some of the costs for safeguarding training for our leaders, so all members know they are meeting in a safe place. Last year's initiative also helped the Martin Poynter Trust raise money for stroke victims. Wolverton Folk and Blues Fair raised money for leukemia research and Challenge and Adventure for young people. For the last 3 years, St Catherine's School has been a lead charity for the festival, with £5,000 raised to date. Last year, the festival joined forces with Stand Up to Cancer. A staggering £64,000 was raised.
And that's all we have time for, so it's goodbye from Sonara.
And it's goodbye from Mike. Bye-bye, everyone.
Our readers today are Jan and
Peter Boffin.
we're starting off with the letters page. Advanced nurse practitioners make all the difference. From Clive Oliver of Freshwater. I would like to thank D.W. Ringrose for the very kind letter in the County Press of the 24th of February, highlighting the high level of care experienced at our practice, the Brookside Health Centre at Freshwater. It is so encouraging to receive such positive recognition for our practice team's high standard of care and support. As many of our patients have discovered, our advanced nurse practitioners provide a fantastic service, being able to deal with the majority of ailments and health problems. With the reduced numbers of GPs affecting many practices across the country, including ourselves, the introduction of advanced nurse practitioners has made a vital and positive difference to primary care, enabling GPs to focus on those things which need a GP's attention and helping to ensure everyone receives the best possible care. Once again, many thanks for taking the time to share your positive experience.
And here's a letter from John Claydon from Sandown, and he's talking about the new Undercliff Road, where, if you remember, the Undercliff Road slipped away. And he says, I'm responding to Ross Finden's report on reopening Undercliff Drive between St Lawrence and Knighton. What a relief it was to read about Councillor Dave Stewart talking about reopening the road, even to the extent of a bridge over the landslip something. I have always thought of myself as most other solutions are likely to be cost prohibitive. My suggestion would be a single carriageway, shallow arch bridge of steel beams made to look attractive with railings painted black and perhaps posts with finials on top. It would be held together between the two load-bearing points by adjustable chains or cables under tension and decked with a composite material controlled by traffic lights and a height and width barrier to allow light traffic only. And HGVs would still have to go around via Whitwell. And the reopening of the road, I'm sure, would be much to the relief of the residents of both St Lawrence and Knighton, to say nothing of Ventnor and the surrounding area. This would also greatly benefit island visitors, as the drive through there in a dappled summer sunshine, with glimpses of the blue sea below, is a treat to behold, and indeed a visitor attraction in itself. There would, of course, be the added benefit to the businesses that must be suffering because of the road closure. The cost of what I am suggesting is negligible in comparison, as nature has already overcome the drainage problems with the landslip itself, as the original problem was caused by the road acting as a dam, which has now been breached. It would be sensible also to add a path for horse riders and walkers over the landslip on the top side to give cyclists the choice of either route.
And here's a letter from Terry Clarkson, who's the County Parade Marshal, Royal British Legion of the Isle of Wight. This year commemorates the 100th anniversary of the forming of the Women's Royal Naval Service in November. During both World Wars, there were several naval stations on the island, at Cowes, Bembridge and elsewhere, mostly crewed by Wrens, and it is their service, then and since, the RBL would like to celebrate. The Royal British Legion County Committee would like to invite all former Wrens living on the island to take part in the County Poppy Appeal launch in October in Ryde, where they will be guests of honour and play a leading part in the ceremonies. I hope they will get in touch with me, either on my landline number of 856695 or my mobile of 0791 406 7709 for further details.
And now here's a letter with headline that says, Island to get more money for schools. That's from Nick Gibb, who's an MP and a schools minister in London. And he says, I'm writing in response to a story under the headline, Fight Isle of Wight School Cuts, MP told. As the minister responsible for school funding in England, I'm determined to end the historical postcode lottery of the current school funding system, which sees children with similar needs receive very different amounts of funding in different parts of the country. Funding every child fairly and according to their specific needs sits at the heart of delivering the government's pledge to build a country that works for everyone, not just the privileged few. To deliver this, school funding is at its highest level on record and will be over £40 billion in 2016 and 17. In addition, as pupil numbers determine schools' funding, should pupil numbers rise, the amount of money schools receive will also increase. However, the current system for distributing school funding is unfair, opaque and outdated. It's based on inconsistent decisions that have been built up over many years and on pupil information that is over a decade old. And a case for change is clear. And that is why we are proposing to introduce a national funding formula that will create a system that funds schools fairly and according to the needs of their current pupils, not just their postcode. And under the proposed formula, more than half of England's schools will receive a cash boost. This includes the Isle of Wight, which would gain as whole by 1.2%, which amounts to just under £900,000 in the next academic year if the proposals were implemented in full. Separately, while some schools will see reductions as we bring the funding system up to date, we have built significant protection into the formula, so no school will face a reduction of more than 1.5% per pupil per year or 3% per pupil overall. It's also important to note every school is funded individually, and where schools on the Isle of Wight are due to see increases under our formula, then this is not at the expense of neighbouring schools. Rather, our formula bases each school's funding on the individual needs of its pupils, so schools with pupils with additional needs, including those from disadvantaged backgrounds, would receive significant additional funding. As a whole, under the proposals, the Isle of Wight would see no reduction in funding for pupils with special educational needs. We do recognise schools are facing cost pressures, so we will continue to provide advice and support to help them use their funding in cost-effective ways. For example, by helping schools improve the way they buy goods and services. We know it is important we get the formula right, so every pound has the greatest impact. Our consultation runs until March the 22nd, and I would encourage everyone to contribute, as we are keen to hear from as many schools, governors, local authorities and parents as possible.
And the letter of the week this week is again to do with Knighton, and this is from Mrs. J. Cox of Knighton. Tourism and travel are soon to be dead in villages. Once again, we have been duped by Southern Vectis. Double-deckers were introduced after the summer months, which helped with the overload of passengers on the smaller buses. This was also a ploy to lull people into a false sense of security, as there was obviously no intention of returning to an hourly service in the summer months for the number 6 bus. What else can be said about our amazement, disgust and despair at these latest antics of buffoons, who probably drive cars or have never waited for 3 hours in cold weather to get home when being of a senior age? Why is Knighton treated like a desert island when it is considered a salubrious area? What a great pity we have no decent public transport. It is going to the dogs like most other things in this country, she says. It has been suggested to ask for lifts from others, which is not only embarrassing but should not occur, as it takes away dignity and independence.
And now, the time for Looking Back. And 100 years ago,
March the 3rd, 1917. The rural notices were particularly frantic, as those involved in food production looked desperately at ways to maximise the output and minimise waste. In an effort to maintain the sanctity of the Sabbath while not wasting a moment of valuable time, it was suggested labourers be preached to as they toiled in the fields on a Sunday. Other suggestions included ploughing the fields at night as well as by day, and conscripting conscientious objectors and prisoners of war into the fields. One notice said, "The public does not yet seem to have been brought to realise the serious scarcity of potatoes. If drastic measures are not taken at once in every household and public resort, it is possible there will be no potatoes at all in the country in May and June." Panic stations.
chip free. And 75 years ago, March the 7th, 1942, Warship Week was deemed a rousing success. The county press reported, "As we confidently predicted in our latest issue, the people of the island have made a noble response to the Warship Week appeal. As a whole, the island raised £292,842, which is the equivalent of 2,661,755 in today's money, towards the construction of warships."
Ventnor and Newport were congratulated on being among the prize winners in the Great National Waste Paper Salvage Competition, held during January by the Waste Paper Recovery Association. Nationally, a record-breaking 100,000 tonnes of paper was salvaged, and a total prize pot of £20,000, £864,750 in today's money, was divided up among the handful of winners.
So, save your county presses. And 50 years ago, February the 25th, 1967, the island mourned its history as two 200-foot high cranes standing in a disused East Cowes shipyard were pulled down. Formerly J. Samuel White's, the area had to be cleared to make way for a development by the British Hovercraft Corporation and the 160-ton SRN-4 cross-channel hovercraft.
Proving trials for electric trains took place on the 8.5-mile stretch of newly installed electrified railway between Ryde and Shanklin. This marked a step forward for the £500,000 investment, 8,328 in today's money, due to begin operation on March the 20th.
And 25 years ago, that's just before I came to the island, March the 6th, 1992, the island's spokesman for Britain's shortest-lived regiment was campaigning to get the unit properly recognised. Jock East, 75, of Ryde, served in the Glider Pilot Regiment, which was inaugurated in 1942 and disbanded in 1957. And during the war, it lost a high proportion of its 2,500 volunteers serving over Norway, Normandy, Sicily and Arnhem.
And also 25 years ago, Sandown Beach made a splash in the Heinz Good Beach Guide, being the only Isle of Wight resort to be singled out for a prestigious Recommended Beach Award. While Sandown was given a 3-star rating, Shanklin came up short with only 2 stars. Also enjoying a 3-star rating, if not winning an award, were Compton Bay, Totland Bay, Colwell Bay, Norton, East Cowes and Whitecliff Bay.
And only 10 years ago, on March the 2nd, 2007, the Isle of Wight Council was the worst performing in its group with a 2-star adequate rating. The Conservative administration fell down in education, affordable housing and performance management. However, it was noted an improvement had been made on previous years.
An unadopted road in East Cowes was badly damaged and a school closed for the day after a southern water pipe burst in a field, releasing a torrent of raw sewage. The pressure of the mess caused cracks into the road up to 8 inches deep and 4 foot long.
10 years ago, around 100 bags full of debris from the cargo ship Napoli were washed ashore on the island beaches. Items included BMW first aid kits, boxes of chocolates and bottles of shampoo. And the debris had swept in from the coast of Dorset, where the 62,000-ton ship ran aground and broke up in stormy weather a month earlier.
And there's a new correspondent now, Alan Stroud, doing a regular item.
White memories.
White memories.
The landslip at the Undercliff Drive 14 years ago is just one recent example of the island geology being no respecter of property. Landslips, major and minor, have been unceremoniously dumping islanders' homes and possessions into the sea for thousands of years. The coastline from Compton to Yaverland is always on the move, and it can disappear at a very rapid pace. Since the first Ordnance Survey map was drawn in 1810, parts of the cliff edge at Blackgang have moved nearly 100 metres inland, and in 1799 the whole of the nearby Pitlands farm, more than 100 acres, has disappeared beneath the waves. The next big fall was in July 1928. Deep cracks appeared in the clifftop fields of Blackgang, prompting the council to close the Undercliff Road linking Chale to Ventnor. And it was a good job it did. Within days, 100,000 tons of rock tumbled down and completely buried the road, and the man from the county press was on the spot. The cliff crumbled and thundered down onto the road below. Clouds of dust arose, blotting out the view, and in a minute it was all over, leaving the changed cliff line, a vanished road, a dead rabbit, and a handful of half-dazed people, he wrote. And 2 months later, a massive landslide carried the entire road away. The County Press reported, an area of at least 50 acres is literally moving seawards at a truly alarming pace. Since Wednesday, the land has been moving so rapidly as to change the whole face of the landscape every few hours. And 50 feet of the roadway cracked and slipped away, the surface of the road turning inwards and downwards in the most outstanding fashion as it went. The whole area was scoured with cracks, which by Thursday had become huge fissures, 20 feet wide. Several acres of land had sunk into a depth of 20 feet to 30 feet in places.
And that was the end of the road, described at the time by the county press as perhaps the most popular and beautiful drive on the island. Today, the 2 severed, stranded ends can still be seen. One just past the entrance to Blackgang Chine, the other becoming the car park at Knowles Farm Viewpoint. By the early 70s, there were only 3 occupied houses in that landslip area. South View, which had become a holiday centre for naturists, Sandrock Spring House, and across the road, Sandrock Spring Cottage, both owned by the Young family of Young's TV and radio fame. In 1978, they all fell victim to another massive landslip. Richard Young was interviewed the following year by Henry Hislop for his programme on Isle of Wight Hospital Radio, and told him of the night he lost his house. It was a chilling commentary. Sandrock Spring House really was a super house, built like a Swiss chalet, with superb views across the sea and lovely grounds around it. We lived there for 34 years. Across the road we had Sandrock Spring Cottage, which in itself was a very charming place. It was March 1978 when the terrible things happened. The first warning I had was when Chris, my son, called me in the shop at Ryde and said he'd heard tree roots cracking, which alarmed him, and he said, "Dad, I think you should come back." I came back as quick as I could, but it wasn't quick enough. As I went to walk down to the house, I met my wife and Chris, who'd already told her, "We've got to get out now." As they came out, the kitchen floor was beginning to rise up, where the house was compressing with the movement of the large mass of earth. There was almost a quarter of a mile of ground on the move. It wasn't just a little tiny bit. We stood and watched all the electric light poles come over. It was terrible. They were flashing and banging away. I came back to the house the next morning, hoping it might have stood it, but it wasn't to be. It was still intact. The roof was quite good, as a matter of fact, but it was cracked very, very badly. Doors were lopsided. It was a job to open them, and the poor old cottage across the road was just a heap of rubble, with the roof laying on top like a hat. Everything in the house was topsy-turvy. The beautiful antique staircase in the house had all gone crooked. You had a job to walk up it. Most of the stuff in the cottage got pretty well wrecked. It was very beautiful. It was a gift to have been permitted to live in such a place. It all blended in so beautifully with the surroundings. It was fantastic. Even now I go down there once or twice a week, but of course there's no house anymore. The landslips continue. The attractions at Blackgang Chine have been affected, retreating through the decades. Gore Cliff Cottage was lost in 1994. The most recent slip of any size was in 2003. The road section which fell away was eventually replaced with a pedestrian and cycle track, with at least talk of a replacement road emerging. But like many man-made structures in the area, whether it be path or road, its days will be numbered. It's sad.
Very close. And now, behind the news, James Woolven finds how the row over the Ryde area rink has hit sport. He says, young synchronised skaters and ice hockey players hit the streets of London to protest outside the offices of the investment company that locked them out of the rink. Skaters, parents, grandparents and members of the Ryde Arena Community Action Group gathered outside the offices of AEW in Jermyn Street, central London, kitted out in their dance team uniforms and hockey kits. The synchronised skaters, some as young as 6, performed in a flash mob dance opposite the hotel and handed out roses with personal messages about the rink to staff members who came in and out of the building. No representative of AEW, which leases the rink from the Isle of Wight Council, came out to talk to the group, and door staff at the beginning said there was no one available in the office to comment and called the police. However, when police officers arrived, they were sympathetic with the rink users' cause and went into the office themselves to find someone who would talk to the young skaters. Still to no avail. And the group, who were holding placards with slogans such as "Frozen out by the AEW," were protesting against the decision made by AEW in October last year to change the locks on the rink, barring the not-for-profit community trust that ran the rink from access. AEW says the reason for locking the rink team out was because rent went unpaid. But Ride Arena Community Action Group says AEW was unreasonable to expect full rent after a storm in November 2015 ripped sections of the building's roof off and disabled parts of the building, including the cafe and the bar area where the rink made most of its money.
Robbie Jones, a former duty manager at the rink and member of Ride Arena Community Action Group, said, "A lot of people are saying we should have paid our rent, but it wasn't as simple as that. When the roof blew off, insurance money was supposed to cover the rebuilding. Ride Arena Trust waited for the repairs to be finished, but were finally told AEW had accepted a lump sum of £180,000 in lieu of repairs to the cafe, and the cafe would not be reopening. 60% of the rink's trade came through the cafe and bar, but they still wanted to charge the full rent with only 40% of the business open. On October the 6th last year, rink users turned up to find the locks changed. Now, less than 2 years after buying the rink, AEW is putting it up for sale for more than 3 times the price it paid, despite it being in a worse condition than when it got it. Rabina Marshall, chairman of Ride Arena Community Action Group, said, "Overnight and with no warning, AEW destroyed the dreams of thousands of islanders whose lives have been changed by skating, not to mention 30 full and part-time jobs lost. AEW has avoided contact with the community. It has cancelled meetings organised by our MP and hung up the telephone on one of our representatives. The protesters are demanding AEW finds a way to reopen the building to use as an ice rink, cafe bar and entertainment venue at or below the price it paid, and that it fully repairs at its cost the facility to the state required by the freeholder, the Isle of Wight Council. Any loss should be borne in full by the management team of AEW and not its investors, the campaigners say." Rabina added, "We believe AEW has engaged in the worst sort of speculation, profiting at enormous social expense to the community. We need AEW's management team to do the ethical thing by the rink users as well as by the pensioners and other investors they are working on behalf of." An Isle of Wight Council spokesperson said, "Isle of Wight Council has met representatives acting for AEW and understands AEW is considering its options for the building. The council is committed to continuing discussions with AEW." AEW declined to comment on any question put to it by the county press.
Yeah.
That's ongoing.
Right, and now there are various things coming to happen here on the island. For instance, on the 1st to the 4th of June, there's a jazz weekend at Newport, and it has the National Youth Jazz Orchestra, Leon Carroll Trio, the Vasilis Xenopoulos and Nigel Price, Derek Nash the Quintet, David Newton and Alan Barnes, Nikki Lies and Stan Suzman, Liz Fletcher and Zoe Rachman, Nick Page Quintet, the Sandy Suchadolowski Trio, and the Savoy Collection. And there's also Nate Najar Trio and the Alley Cats, plus much more, if you can pronounce their names. And if you want to see the website for all details, go to newportjazzweekend.co.uk. And the tickets are on sale at the Isle of Wight County Press shop now. Is there more excitement coming? Yes, there is.
Well, another jazz at the Apollo is Newport Jazz Club presents the Dennis Rollins Velocity Trio. Dennis Rollins, trombone, Ross Stanley, Hammond organ, and Pedro Segundo, percussion. And that's on Sunday, the 19th of March, between 3 and 5:30 p.m. The tickets are £12, £5 for students, obtainable from 730-601 or 523-879, and on the door if available. And that's at the Apollo Theatre in Pyle Street, Newport.
And apparently there's now a panel of columnists who take it in turn to give their take on life as it's played out on the Isle of Wight. It's called My View. And today's view writer is Rebecca Roncoroni, who says, which generation deserves blame? Millennials are commonly understood to be those born between 1980 and 1994, and there's been much negativity written about this generation, with them being labelled lazy, entitled, narcissistic and spoilt. And that's nothing new. It's almost obligatory for older generations to criticise the younger as feckless, disrespectful, lazy, etc. And the quote by Peter the Hermit in 1274 could have been written today in any newspaper. And this is what he said in 1274. The young people of today think of nothing but themselves. They have no respect for their parents or old age. They are impatient of all restraint. They talk as if they alone know everything, and what passes for wisdom in us, foolishness in them. As for girls, they are foolish and immodest and unwomanly in speech, behaviour and dress. And that's from Peter the Hermit in the 11th century. And we forget this generation has grown up during the global financial crisis, austerity and war with ISIS. And climate change is terrifying. They have been the first generation that has been educated in and involved with the rapid rate of technological change, are facing 0 hours contracts with little or no or out-of-work benefits, sky-high rents and impossibly high house prices. University education now means saddling yourself with huge debts with no guarantee of a job on finishing. And that's what Rebecca thinks about things to come.
Right.
And there's more things happening on the island in Revere.
There's a few more items. A musical salute to Life of Isle of Wight stage stalwart. A musical tribute has been paid to a stalwart of the island's amateur theatre scene. The Good Old Days, a variety show celebrating the life of Alain Smith, was staged at the Apollo Theatre, Newport, last weekend. Alongside song and dance numbers, acts included a flea circus, a counting donkeys, synchronised swimming, and a magic show, plus performances from members of the Apollo Youth Theatre. Alan died of a heart attack last year, and proceeds from the show were donated to the British Heart Foundation. Director Helen Clinton Pacey, who was coached by Alan for the show 6 Dances in 6 Weeks, said, I had explained to Alan I had no coordination because of fracturing my skull. But by the time he had spent hours of his own time teaching me, I felt like Ginger Rogers.
Now, what's that? Flying boats.
There's an item about flying boats to a rocket in life story. Shall we try that?
I don't know. I'm quite happy to try it. Flying boats to a rocket in life story. The fascinating story of a man who worked at Saunders Row and helped to develop the Princess flying boats. The Black Knight rocket and the hovercraft had been published. Leonard Edward Henry Brett, now in his 90s, of Baring Road, Cowes, has brought together an account of one of the town's most significant firms and his own upbringing. The book is illustrated with photographs from his younger days, as well as many previously unseen pictures of Cowes and its once mighty industry. Leonard visited the County Press shop, where he signed copies of his book, My Life from Flying Boats to Hovercraft. And there's a picture of him sitting there with a pen and signing books for people. And he looks a very intelligent sort of man. He was born in Cowes in 1923, and like thousands of other Cowes children, went to Denmark Road School. He left school at 14 to begin an apprenticeship at J.S. White's yard, but unable to develop his passion for electrical work, quickly moved to Saunders Row. He spent the war years at home and was a member of the Home Guard, and immediately after the war was set on a shopping trip where he helped select a number of Walrus aircraft to be prepared and brought back to Cowes, where they were later used as spotter planes for a whaling fleet. The trip nearly cost him his life, as he almost died on a test flight after carbon monoxide poisoning. Later, he was part of the team that developed the flying boats, the Black Knight rocket and the hovercraft. And the book, if you want it, is published by John and Barry Groves and is available from the County Press shop, priced at £10. Apparently volunteers are refusing to hand over the keys for the Frank James Memorial Hospital site to its owners until they agree a date for development work to begin. The Friends of Frank James have been looking after the site for the last 5 years and plan to hand over the keys at a celebration event tomorrow, that's Saturday. The event is still going ahead to honour all their hard work, but volunteers want to know when work to create 17 flats on the East Cowes site, some within the hospital building and some on the side of it, will actually take place, as site owners said it would begin in October last year. Planning permission to convert the hospital was first granted 15 years ago, and the site has fallen victim to break-ins and vandalism during that time. Tanja Rebel, a member of the Friends of Frank James, said, "Until I get clear assurances from the owners that the work will commence very soon, including a certain date, and they are going to take care of the trees or warn us at least 2 weeks in advance if any of them need to be replanted, I will not hand over the keys." And the event will include refreshments and a display of the hospital's history. The East Cowes event coincides with the National Health Service protest in London, which sees the Isle of Wight branch of Unison and Islanders travel to support the cause. Under a banner of no cuts, no closures, no privatisation, it's been organised in protest to National Health Service and social care runs. And anyone unable to attend the national demonstration is welcome to join the East Cowes gathering. So there.
And another item to do with the NHS, call out for mainland ambulances. Mainland ambulance crews may once again be brought in to help with the growing pressures on the Isle of Wight. Since April 2016, there have been more than 10,000 emergency admissions to St Mary's Hospital and more than 15,000 calls for an ambulance. The move is partly the result of Isle of Wight paramedics having to plug a gap at the urgent care service, formerly the Beacon Centre, because there was a lack of GPs to staff it. A shortage of GPs able to visit patients at home has also been highlighted as putting extra pressure on the island's ambulance service. An Isle of Wight NHS Trust spokesperson said at times of pressure, ambulance resources from the British Red Cross, the St John's Ambulance and mainland services such as South Central Ambulance Service and the private sector may be brought onto the island to assist. Mainland ambulances have been used on the Isle of Wight before, the NHS spokesman said. Depending on how busy the service expects to be, there will, at any particular time, be 4 and 6 999 emergency ambulances and 1 or 2 rapid response vehicles available. With one ambulance based in Ryde and the rest in Newport, an Isle of Wight councillor has raised concerns over the time taken to reach emergencies in the West Wight. Speaking at this month's Isle of Wight Council Health Scrutiny meeting, Councillor John Howe, who represents Totland, said the community should have an ambulance based nearby, as it had some years ago. We are relying on first responders, non-medical professionals, to save people's lives, he said. It feels like we are going backwards, almost to the point where we will have a voluntary ambulance service like we did years ago. Councillor Howe said paramedics were often stuck at St Mary's Hospital waiting with patients to be admitted, but the process was slowed down because of a lack of available beds, partly because some patients were unable to leave hospital because of a lack of appropriate care in that community. That prevented paramedics from getting out to other patients who needed an ambulance. Dr. Mark Pugh, the Executive Medical Director at the Isle of Wight NHS Trust, said, "Paramedics are waiting with patients because at times there is literally no room inside the hospital. We are trying to create capacity, and it is safer for patients to have paramedics tending to them on a trolley than just being on a corridor. The place is so full it can be absolutely bursting at times." And I think that's about all we have got time for.
I'm sure it is, and it just shows you what a sort of busy place the Isle of Wight is.
It certainly is.
So it's a goodbye from
Jan?
And it's also goodbye from me, Peter. Goodbye.
This is a download from the BBC. For more information and our terms of use, go to www.bbc.co.uk/in-touch. Good evening. Tonight, what happens when a man's best friend doesn't quite come up to expectations?
I think, like a lot of people, I viewed guide dogs as being a cross between Lassie and Google Maps.
We hear about the anatomy of a doggy divorce. But first, an incident last Thursday evening in Greater Manchester has reopened the debate about the use of tasers by the police. They are used as a way of immobilising someone in what's seen as a threatening situation. But this was the second case of their being used on a visually impaired person in the northwest of England in recent years. Here's part of a press release issued by Greater Manchester Police the day after the incident.
2 witnesses, as well as our firearms officers, believed the man was acting in an agitated manner, and in the dark, the folded cane appeared to be a gun. An initial review of the incident leads us to believe the experienced firearms officers carried out a suitable risk assessment and, with the information he had available at the time, made what appeared to be an appropriate decision. The man was uninjured during the incident, and today officers have been with him and have now apologised for what happened. The man has accepted our apology and doesn't wish to make a complaint, and the man acknowledged that his behaviour could have led to people being concerned. We regret that a taser was used on an unarmed person and will continue to review our training in light of this incident.
Well, we did approach Greater Manchester Police to put someone up to discuss this case on the programme. They were not willing to do so and so far haven't responded to our request for any update on the incident. Meanwhile, their original statement hasn't been enough to reassure the visually impaired people who've been contacting us to express their shock about this case. Amongst them, Ken McClymont from Dudley in the West Midlands, who's been talking about the case with a number of blind and partially sighted people in his area.
We have a meeting in Dudley which was launched last month for visually impaired people to come to discuss any issues that they've got. And we usually have a speaker. We'd had the speaker and we're then going on to discuss other issues. And somebody said, "Oh, did you hear about that poor man last week that got tasered by the police?" And we then got on to discussing who needed a white stick. Was it the man or was it the policeman? After all, if you think a white stick that's folded up is a gun, it's very worrying. And one of our young ladies actually works for West Midlands Police, and she said, "Well, I'd be happy to take it to the police." And I said it'd be very good if the group could work with the local police to find a way forward so this doesn't happen in our area.
Can you give me a sense of the overall feeling of the meeting about this and the fact that it had happened?
Shock, I think, in one word, Peter. And this sadly isn't the first time that this has happened. It happened in the neighbouring force in Lancashire. So I'm hoping that the Northwest Constabularies aren't trigger happy with their tasers towards visually impaired people for any reason.
Well, it's a concern which is shared by solicitor advocate Sophie Khan. She's currently representing several other members of the public who have been tasered in the past. She also represented the blind man in Chorley. Well, I asked her what her concerns were about this case.
My main concern is the policy. Is the policy strong enough to safeguard against these kind of incidences in the future?
But the policy does not at any point say that tasers can't ever be used on people who are vulnerable, but there are rules about how it should be done.
Well, it says that if someone is vulnerable and the police officer believes they are, and there's reports that they are, the circumstances show that they are, then it is the last feasible option to use the taser. So it has to be no other option available before the taser is deployed. And obviously in these circumstances we've only got a very limited amount of information from the police, who have done an initial review and said that they were looking to the training, but that's all we've got. We don't know what the circumstances were outside of what they have told us.
Now, do you accept that there are situations in which the police need this when they're faced with a situation that they feel is dangerous for the public?
Yes, when someone's got a weapon which they're going to use to cause life-threatening incidences, firearms officers, I would agree and accept that they would need to carry a taser with them.
And of course, that's what they said that they thought in this case. That's the mistake. I mean, they admit now it was a mistake, but that's what they thought at the time, that the cane was a weapon.
Yes, I know, but we haven't got the background as to how and why they would come to that conclusion without any kind of review or investigation, independent investigation I'm calling for. We'll never know whether that was a reasonable thought or, reasonable suspicion to have that a folded up walking stick was a gun.
Sophie Khan. Listener Leslie Young was also shocked by this incident. Her late father was a totally blind man who'd been a regular commuter in that area of Manchester. But it was the development the day after the incident which particularly upset her. When Steve White, the chair of the Police Federation of England and Wales, tweeted this comment: "Blind man tasered as cane mistaken for gun in Levenshume. Must ask, why is this news? Great response by GM Police." Well, Leslie emailed us to say,
"This typifies how out of touch the police are. The man who boasts of having 28 years policing experience and boasts of representing 122,000 police men and women is clearly oblivious to the ramifications of this incident for thousands of blind and partially sighted citizens of this country that he and his colleagues are paid to protect. He probably speaks for the rest of the police force, highlighting that any lessons from the previous Chorley incident have not been learned or applied to modern policing tactics."
Well, Steve White, chair of the Police Federation, agreed to join us on the programme to answer some of the points our listeners have been making. And I began by asking him how he defended a tweet which had clearly caused great offence to some blind people.
And I certainly regret that. And of course, it's one of the one of the dangers of Twitter in that you've only got 140 characters in order to put a point across. And of course, the tweet that I sent, in fact, mostly quoted the BBC News headlines. And the point that I was making was this. There had been an incident that had been appropriately responded to by the police service. It was regrettable that a gentleman who was visually impaired and blind was tasered. However, the local police recognised that at the conclusion of the resolution, offered an immediate apology, and dealt with the gentleman in an appropriate way. Who claimed that he didn't want to make a complaint or take anything further, and indeed recognised that his behaviour could have been interpreted as being threatening. That was the point that I was making, but I certainly accept that in 140 characters that's sometimes challenging.
Well, it looks as if the police are uncaring about it, because you refer to the fact that it was a blind man, and had you been talking about concern about tasering, that might have been acceptable, but you make it look as if the police don't care that a blind man has been tasered.
No, and that's not true at all. And indeed, when you're looking at the officers, these were highly trained officers who were armed response officers as well, in the way that they respond and the training that they have in terms of assessing risk. Unfortunately, they don't have the luxury of spending an awful lot of time in terms of determining exactly what they are dealing with. They're faced with a threat, and in this particular case, there were two members of the public and police officers who assessed the threat to be of sufficiently a high enough level in order to deal with it with the deployment of taser. What I think is important, though, is to recognise that, thank goodness, that we do have a less than lethal option in relation to taser, because before the advent of taser, I think the outcome could have been very different.
But Steve, I carry a white cane. It is very hard to understand how police officers could mistake it for a gun.
And I think in the vast majority of cases it is clearly very clear, and these cases are very few and far between. Let's not overreact. And of course, officers are faced with threats, they're faced with information that is coming from the public, and they have to deal with that.
You mentioned the training. Is there really enough training over, for example, how blind and partially sighted people might be likely to react, and why some methods of actually warning people wouldn't work? Visual warnings, for example, or indeed just a shout in the night, which could have come from anywhere.
Yes, of course, and you're absolutely right. And we're constantly reviewing the way that we train officers and make them tactically aware. We're never going to get it 100% right all of the time, unfortunately. And of course, you would absolutely expect officers to make the appropriate risk assessment, given the luxury of time, and to be able to assess, well, how is this person behaving? What is that they're holding? Could it be something else? Of course, all of those things have to happen. And regrettably, sometimes there are mistakes.
Sophie Khan, who's the solicitor who represented the blind man in Chorley in Lancashire who was tasered, she says that lessons have not been learned from that case and that the training methods need to be tightened up.
No, well, I disagree. It's under constant review, and in fact, the British Police Service have the longest and most comprehensive training package in relation to the use of taser than any police service in the world.
It's an 18-hour course, I believe, and I wonder how much of that time is actually spent on awareness of disability.
And that's a very good point, and certainly in terms of assessing risk, to a certain extent, yes, of course, officers have got to take into account, could this be someone who has a disability? But equally, they have to deal with the threat, and that's what happened up in Manchester.
But you don't think, then, that it does need tightening up? You think it's good enough as it is?
No, I think that we constantly need to learn the lessons. And as I said earlier, undoubtedly from this incident at Manchester, there will be lessons to be learned about it. And we constantly strive to make sure that we get it right every time.
Will you be laying off the tweets in future?
Well, because I'm there to represent our members, and I'm also there to make comment. And in my view, the fact that there was an incident that was successfully brought to a conclusion and no one made a complaint wasn't newsworthy.
Steve White. Well, we will, of course, be interested in your views about this case and whether it affects your sense of safety. But now, something of a change of gear. Writer and climber Red Sale has been reporting to In Touch on his rather uneasy journey towards becoming a guide dog owner. Red's made no secret of the fact that he's not a doggy person. But after much thought and conversations with the Guide Dogs organisation, he decided to take the plunge. He's been telling me what happened.
Fairly early on, I was a bit wrong-footed by just how bouncy she was. I mean, clearly a very intelligent dog, but she was just into everything, wanted an awful lot of attention, and if we got to the front gate of the house, she was straining to head off to the park to go for a run rather than actually paying attention to the fact that I was wanting to turn left to go to the shops. So it was always a bit of a struggle to get her on message, even after I'd slipped on the harness. And also, I have to confess that because she was needy, I got to understand exactly what the expression dogging someone's tracks means. She was at my heels all the time, wanting attention, and to be perfectly honest, I need to switch off. I need to forget that I'm blind sometimes. And from the moment I woke up to the moment I went to bed, she was a constant reminder of my blindness and my need for a dog.
And was that something you weren't expecting? I mean, she is a guide dog after all, so the idea is that she is with you.
Never having grown up with dogs, I wasn't quite prepared for how strong the bond from her to me was in her eyes. When I talked to the Guide Dog Association, they did explain that they do select dogs who have a degree of neediness to an extent, because that means that they form the bond with their owner a lot better. But I think part of the problem is that I like friendship, and one of the good things about friendship is it tends to be on equal footing. I'm just not cut out to be anybody's god, and I think the fact that the dog did think that I was God, I just found a bit disturbing, to be honest.
I also gather that there were particular situations that she didn't like.
Yes, I take her to yoga, and though she was very good at demonstrating the downward dog position, she would howl all the way through, so I couldn't take her there anymore. And I go swimming in the men's pond on Hampstead Heath, and she would go and stand at the end of the jetty like the French lieutenant's woman and howl until I came back.
Now, I think you've said that the trainers did everything they could. Is there any more that could have been done in a way to prepare you for the experience?
The guide dog instructors actually couldn't have worked harder to keep the two of us together. They were brilliant, and a lot of what they did try did work. But I think the problem is I probably had a bit of an underlying trust issue with trusting my life to a dog, and I never really felt the love that I know she was craving, I suppose. It is a relationship, it's an arranged marriage, and I think either we just weren't the right pairing, or I have issues about being a dog owner that I will probably never overcome. So certainly I don't see any fault on either side. It's just I don't think we were the right couple.
What were you expecting?
I think, like a lot of people, I viewed guide dogs as being a cross between Lassie and Google Maps. But at the end of the day, she was an animal and she was fallible. And I think the problem is, as a blind person, when you do get led into a wheelie bin by a guide dog that's been distracted by a cat, your trust does suffer. And maybe my expectations were too high.
How have people reacted to what you've done?
I think there have been a fair amount of people who suspect that I've been too hasty, even though it was 8.5 months, and that I should have worked harder at it. In fairness, they don't tend to be dog owners, and they don't tend to be other visually impaired people. They tend to be the people who looked at her and thought, what a beautiful dog. I'd love one like that. Unfortunately, they probably wouldn't want the blindness that went with it. One of the real treats of being a guide dog owner is that I've been introduced to the dog owning fraternity and sorority, and what a lovely bunch of people. I was really afraid that they would now treat me as a pariah for having dumped my dog, but actually they've been the most understanding people. They've just gone, the dog wouldn't have been happy if the relationship wasn't working properly, and I was getting to the stage where I was beginning to resent Ella's presence.
How did the family react?
We were all upset to see her go. She had occupied quite a place in the house for the previous 8.5 months, but actually all of us were quite relieved to see her go. She was rather like one of those large destructive toddlers who just rushes around and breaks everything, and she was always in everybody's face. And yes, I think we're quite happy to return to business as usual.
But you've also talked on this programme about, you know, some of the hazards that you've faced. You've fallen into ponds, you've walked into things. What's it been like going back to the cane?
Hard. I had got used to people getting out of my way. That's the one thing I really did appreciate about having a guide dog. There are two of you and people do just spring out of the way. Yes, it's been a bruising experience. Ella was always a very fast walker, and actually I always felt slightly nervous trying to keep up with her. And it's been really nice to walk slowly round the local streets again, and it's been nice to stop and have conversations with people. I had somebody come up to me last week and say, "Oh, I haven't spoken to you for 6 months," and I'm back in charge of my own life. The odd thing about her was I actually felt my independence was less with her because of her dependence on me, and the fact that I had to be on the lookout all the time for what she was up to. And it really is quite a relief being in charge of my own destiny, even if that's a little bit more bruising than it was with a dog.
Red Sail. And just to put Red's experience into perspective, guide dogs tell us that of the partnerships currently formed between dog and owner, 92% are still operating a year later. That's it for today. You can call our action line on 0800 044 044 for 24 hours after the programme, or you can email in touch at bbc.co.uk. From me, Peter White, producer Lee Kumatat and the team, goodbye.